fringe culture computer geeks, or the ruling elite of the internet, immature, at times harmful pranksters, or modern Robin Hoods righting social wrongs, an easily corruptible, leaderless group, or a powerful, unified social force. Public opinion garners rigidly contrasting reactions, but most can agree the subversive nature of Anonymous has ignited important conversations about the nature of hacktivism. Hacktivism describes the practice of gaining unauthorized access to a computer system and carrying out various disruptive actions as a means of achieving political or social goals. Hacktivists, who are part of the collective Anonymous, most often use illegal DDoS or distributed denial of service attacks to take down websites. Who or what is Anonymous? This is challenging to define. Anonymous originated in 2003 on 4chan, a discussion board initially created for the purpose of posting childish and offensive jokes and photos. It became the initiating site for nearly all of the internet's most popular memes. When users chose not to provide a username, they appeared amongst many others as anonymous. Over time, it evolved into an ideology or movement rather than a group, an anarchist, digital hive-like brain. It is not considered a group by those, called Anons, who belong to the collective, nor by security experts. It is a movement, an ideology, a shape-shifting subculture, a series of relationships.
Hello, citizens of the world, we are Anonymous. It is time to realize social media is a solid platform for ISIS's communication as well as neutering their ideas of terror among youth, but at the same time social media has proven that it is an advanced weapon. We must all work together and use social media to eliminate the accounts belonging to terrorists.
According to a video created by an Anon on YouTube, to most of you, we are computer hackers. To your governments, we are a terrorist organization. To corporations, we are wicked infiltrators and harbingers of merciless justice. To be anonymous comes from the heart, to pursue a better world, one that flourishes in peace and prosperity for all. To be anonymous is to be an agent of truth and justice in a world of darkness. To be anonymous is to be a warrior for righteousness and justice. Anonymous is no more than an idea. It is no more than a whisper on the lips of the young revolutionaries and wise elders across the world. Anonymous is an ideology based around the principles of no more than truth, justice, and equality. It is not an underground hacker society. Anonymous is the future. Anonymous is a better world. In the grandiloquent style that has become typical to communications linked to Anonymous, they refer to the concept of the good life, which alludes to other philosophers such as Alan Bloom, the author of The Closing of the American Mind, and the Aristotelian ethics to find wisdom and happiness. As the idea of Anonymous has evolved, Anons striking out to right perceived wrongs act on the desire to be ethical avengers on a global scale. Each Anon's perception of truth, justice, and equality may vary, and herein lies the challenge. Are the ideologies Anonymous embraces and the actions Anons take to promote them synchronous with ethical vigilantism? In order to fully explore the question of whether hacktivism is an ethical practice overall, one must explore the philosophical underpinnings of both the societies the act impacts and the groups who undertake the release of protected information. Yet, hacked information impacts globally, be it from information provided to WikiLeaks or matters of national security or the release of nude photos. How can we determine the social impact when society's cultural norms and moral codes differ so greatly? cultural relativism or moral universalism? Cultural relativism theorizes that there is no universal truth in ethics. It accepts different societies have different moral codes, and there is no impartial rubric to evaluate whether one social code is better or more right than another. These codes must coexist as equally correct, and we must accept all practices of other cultures tolerantly. Any belief that any one culture can judge the conduct of another culture is presumptuous. Our own way of living seems so natural and so right that for many of us it's hard to conceive of others living so differently. Since the time of Herodotus, enlightened observers have been accustomed to the idea that conceptions of right and wrong differ from culture to culture. However, Rachel's provides compelling and logical reasoning to assert all cultures have some values in common, despite appearances, or they would cease to function. This concept is called moral universalism. Whilst we judge certain cultural practices as undesirable, there are in fact certain universal truths that can be reasonably assumed. Generally, there are some moral rules that all societies will have in common because those rules are necessary for society to exist. Values identified as universally treasured morals are love, truthfulness, fairness, freedom, unity, tolerance, responsibility, and respect for life. As we will see later, the criminal system, which is localized, not globalized, does not always align with universal morals. According to Kidder, we all face tough choices. Sometimes we avoid these choices, other times we address them. However, we do not always decide to resolve tough choices. People who have a strong sense of vision and ethical values have the courage to stand up and make the tough choices. Truth and the concept of truth fundamentally defines hacker ethos. Truth wants to be free, and we will make it so. One of the dangers of evaluating a behavior as either right or wrong is the need to use a stable moral code, not one that changes with what's popular, for example. Anonymous provides a difficult case study in terms of moral conduct because it is a movement and a collective which lacks a leader. You or I can join by simply claiming membership. The unstable nature of the group leaves it susceptible to being judged by behaviors of many rather than a typical hierarchical organizational model where one leader determines and holds in place the codes. There is no way to attribute broad characteristics to the collective as there is no membership criteria. Anonymous's tactics can be characterized as somewhat chaotic, but if we extrapolate from many of the most recent and consistent actions, we can infer the most important common mandate is to free knowledge. The collective actions vary in effectiveness, and society is left to accept both the good and the bad choices and outcomes, whatever the intentions. Loosely agreed on goals are formed in forums, and interested anons join in the attacks. The analogy of a murmuration has been used to describe this phenomenon. Why hacktivism? Considering technology as a social, political, and economic force, what conditions are hacktivism or internet activism a response to? The values and interests of elites are installed in the very design of rational procedures and machines even before they are assigned a goal. Technology is not destiny, but a scene of a struggle. Global conditions, such as the ever-increasing gap between the wealthy elite and those who suffer in poverty, oppressive political powers, authoritarian military states, including those shrouded in democratic clothing, and the inability for global citizens to make changes in these systems have marginalized residents on a social, economic, and political level. The ideology of Anonymous has evolved out of the need for a voice and to see a real-world impact from individual and collective action. If Anon's only mandate is to free knowledge and put truth out, they are meeting their mandate. If we evaluate the actions more closely in line with universal morals, many of the actions are questionable. Because they are a collective, their actions reflect a diverse cross-section of human nature who subjectively decide what justice is, for example. Internet activism combined with the influence of Anonymous has resulted in some stunning global results, like the Arab Spring, which required tremendous coordination and action. The most recent and consistent trend overall is effort geared towards causes society would deem as worthy rather than juvenile pranks. Law and ethics do not always reflect each other well and are not an accurate way of judging whether or not an action is unethical. In fact, there are many that purport the punishments for hacktivism are highly disproportionate to the crimes. Perhaps one of the most pivotal legal cases is known as the PayPal 14. Anonymous was accused of lobbying DDoS attacks at PayPal. PayPal had decided to stop the ability for supporters to donate to WikiLeaks. Almost certainly, government intimidation played a large role in this decision. Thousands of people under the ideology of Anonymous disrupted PayPal via this digital protest, a way of stating that information is critical in a democracy. The government considered this to be a criminal act and obtained 14 names of protesters who took part in what lawyers characterize as a digital sit-in. Some legal minds counter that hacktivism is a form of freedom of speech. Michael Ratner, human rights attorney and professor emeritus of the Center for Constitutional Rights, asserts the PayPal 14 should be considered heroes, not criminals. Attorney Stanley Cohen purports Anon members flooded access to PayPal, thereby creating economic distress to a protected corporation. End of story. This is not a case involving identity theft, involving outing emails, involving violating privilege, involving theft of services, involving shutting down business. It is a pure case of internet or cyber sit-ins. When Barack Obama gets on television and says, "Flood the switchboard, shut down the Republicans, send a message," that's legal. This is an electronic sit-in at its finest. Can distributed denial of service attacks, for example, be understood as a new and constitutional tool to protest? Legal response to computer-related crimes varies around the globe. Computer crime laws have developed in response to internet activism using computers. However, activists who use technology to conduct political dissent, hacktivists, are increasingly threatened with investigation, prosecution, and often disproportionately severe criminal sentences. Initially, the PayPal 14 were each charged under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which critics say is overly broad and exposes computer users to extremely harsh sentences for relatively innocuous computer crimes. This included fines of $250,000 each and up to 15 years in federal prison. Ultimately, each defendant pled guilty to a misdemeanor, resulting in a 1 year of probation and a reduced fine of $5,600 each. Attorney Stanley Cohen calls this an important win for civil disobedience in the form of digital protesting. Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, and Chelsea Manning are individuals known for their activism in releasing government secrets via technology. The common thread connecting hacktivists and whistleblowers is the mentality of sharing information and revealing the truth. Julian Assange lives in the Ecuadorian embassy in the United Kingdom to avoid extradition to the United States. Edward Snowden currently lives in Russia, while Chelsea Manning is serving a prison sentence of 35 years in a federal penitentiary. Aaron Swartz was a brilliant young man who ultimately committed suicide during a highly stressful criminal investigation. At 14 years old, Swartz helped develop RSS software, and the next year contacted Lawrence Lessig and helped him author the code for Creative Commons. At 19, he was a creator of Reddit. He became an internet activist. Detailed in United States of America versus Aaron Swartz, he was originally indicted under 6 federal laws, including wire fraud, computer fraud, and aiding and abetting. In the indictment, the grand jury details Swartz's alleged crime of downloading millions of JSTOR documents. He faced $1 million in fines and at least 7 years in federal prison. Justice and morality do not always reflect each other. Have the punishments fit the crimes? Commonly, there are large disparities. If one compares the charges brought up on Aaron Swartz for downloading copyright-protected content to almost all other crimes society would consider morally reprehensible, the contrast becomes clear. In the documentary Anonymous, We Are Legion, a poignant parallel is made between members of Anonymous and Huck Finn. At the end of the book, Huck is told that he has to take the slave, Jim, and give him back. 2 things will happen if he doesn't. 1, legally, he'll go to jail. 2nd, in the evangelical belief of the day, he'll go to hell. The next morning, he says, "Well, damn it, I'll go to hell then." He discovered that in order to be an expert at ethics, you have to transcend the legal and sanctioned religious appropriate truths of the day in order to access the meta-truth of both legality and righteousness. Some hacktivists see themselves as a modern Huck Finn. They will accept the consequences of their actions, but they will fight for what they believe is right. Is it ethical to transcend criminal law to do what one believes is morally right? Is hacktivism a response cultivated by current social conditions, an ethical process to make positive social changes? Certainly, many are filled with hope.